In today's episode, we're talking about leadership and the 5 behaviors that change how your team shows up every single shift. Today's guest has spent over 50 years in retail, running companies that have over 10,000 team members, hundreds of stores, and he was personally mentored by John Maxwell for over a year. He wrote a book recently distilling these 5 rules that he has learned over his 50 years in business. If you lead a restaurant team, you already know the hardest part of the job is not the menu, not the technology, not even the marketing. It's getting all of the people on your team from 30 to 50 to 100 to 500 to row in the same direction each shift. And most of us are coaching to the numbers, and we really need to be considering coaching to behaviors. Sales, labor, food costs, ticket times, all of the things that we talk about on the show are just outputs from the behaviors that your staff is doing. If you don't have common language for how you treat your guests, how you treat each other, and how you treat the work, the numbers are not going to be sustainable. In this conversation, we walk through all 5 rules, including the one rule he had to rename after he watched leaders misread it as soft. We talk about how to spot real drama in your team versus the real life events somebody's carrying into the door. We all have those people that are just filled with drama, as well as those that truly have life issues. And we get into a phrase from his coaching that every leader should steal. Bother me when you need something. Oftentimes, even in my world, I get my team, oh, you're so busy, I don't want to bother you. But truly, leaders are there to help make sure that they help the staff get to where they want to get to. If you're new to the channel, my name is Jeremy Julian. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at CBS North Star. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. And today's episode, I am joined by Steve Black. I've known of Steve for quite some time, but he and I hadn't gotten a chance to connect until very recently. He spent over 50 years in grocery, United Supermarkets, Sprouts as the CIO and CMO through their IPO. He was the president at Lucky's Markets. He was the COO at Rouse's 64 stores down in the Southeast. He worked with John Maxwell, and now he has written a new book and recorded it audio, translated it to Chinese, translated it to Spanish, built a masterclass. He is a true leader's leader. And his and my episode continues to resonate in my brain as things that we need to continue to do. So I would encourage you to check it out and try and implement some of these solutions into your brand. And now on to the episode. Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. I thank everyone out there for joining us, as I like to say each and every time. I know you guys have got lots of choices, so thank you for hanging out. Today, I am joined by a business leader, a thought leader, somebody that I got introduced to very recently, and he and I just jive so well. I'm like, I got to have you on the show because I need to talk a little bit about kind of what you've been doing. But Steve, why don't you give our listeners a little bit of a background? Who is Steve Black? I guess career background, and then we can talk a little bit about, kind of your new go-to-market stuff that you've been doing. That really I think is going to change some people's lives.
All right, thanks for having me, Jeremy. I appreciate that. I've been in the grocery business. This next year will be 50 years. So started out right out of high school with United Supermarkets in Oklahoma, and I spent 27 years there, and then proceeded to move around to. My first move after there was kind of Oklahoma City with Buy for Less, and then I went to Bruno's in Alabama, where I worked on my southern draw a little bit while I was down there. Then I left there, went to out all the way out to Arizona with Sunflower Farmers Markets, and then when Sprouts acquired us, came on board at Sprouts as VP of Operations, and then moved into the CIO role, and then the Chief Marketing Officer role for that company. We went public, and that was quite an adventure. And then
I'm sure.
A couple of years after that, moved to Colorado, where I live now. Worked for Lucky's Markets up here in Colorado as president a couple of years there, and then went to Louisiana to Rouse's Markets and was president and chief operating officer there. We had 64 stores, 3 states, and about 7,000 team members. About 4 years ago, I semi-retired from there.
And are working harder now than before you retired, I'm sure.
Well, I'm working hard, but in the grocery business, it's 5, 6, 7 days a week. So I'm kind of semi-retired, honestly. And then I wrote my book, which you just showed me. You held that up a while ago and had it, but sent that to you to read. Then started speaking in the National Grocers Association, and then RAFTA, several of the grocery associations, and just really had people then come up to me and was interested in the 5 rules. which are the 5 expected behaviors of your team. I would tell you after 50 years in the business, if you can get everybody behaving the same way, using the same common language, you really have something there. We then evolved, had the book come out in English and the audiobook, which I recorded the audiobook, and then had it translated into Spanish. And then I had to hire somebody to translate it into the audiobook into Spanish because I don't speak Spanish. And then I just recently translated it into Chinese. So I'm working with the IGA stores over in China, and we're going to do some workshops over there. Cause the guy I work with there said there was a lot of leadership books in China, but not any that came out of the grocery business. And so a lot of value there. And anyway, then went on to launch an online masterclass because the biggest question I always got was, we love these 5 rules. Well, how do we get them out in all these stores and to the
Yeah.
leadership in all the stores? So that's the beauty of a masterclass. So I partnered up with Jonathan Perkins from Social Octopus, and he helped put together this whole online masterclass, which at this point I've had over 20,000 people go through the masterclass. So it's
That's
been
incredible.
very rewarding, and it's changing behaviors. So that's the fun part that I'm having now, is kind of being able to influence. And that's what leadership is influence, and be able to influence some of the, especially young leaders coming up in the business. And I've even got some clients that have been selling groceries for over 100 years and never invested in leadership training before now. And the biggest comment I get is, oh, if we'd have had this 20 years ago.
Yeah, what a difference that would have made.
Yeah.
Well, and that was part of why for any of the longtime listeners or people that know me outside of kind of the podcast, they know that I'm a prolific reader. I'm constantly trying to invest in myself, but that's not always the way that you do things out there in the world. And unfortunately, there used to be kind of mentorship systems, years ago. You'd kind of come underneath somebody's wing and they would help lead you. But anymore, it's kind of like, hey, sink or swim, go figure it out. And if you're not a self-motivated person, the other thing that I was thinking about while you were explaining, Steve, we're on the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. Restaurant's just a form of retail. And so every once in a while, we'll get somebody that's in the grocery space, or, they're adjacent markets. They serve a lot of the same consumers. I guess I'd love for you to just kind of share with our listeners, really, business is all about people and leading people and helping them to go there, before we kind of dig into the 5 rules, because I'd love to dig through each of those. But why do you think our listeners should listen to a 50-year grocery guy if I run a restaurant? Because I know the answer to that, but I'd love for you to share a little bit of that before we keep rolling.
That's good. I love that question. And I'll tell you this, my first slide in my keynote speech on the 5 rules has 2 images. The first image is, we're a people business. And the second image is, everyone deserves to be led well. So when you think about that, whether you're in a restaurant or convenience store or grocery store, Simon Sinek says this, and it's kind of tongue in cheek. 100% of your customers are people. 100% of your team members are people, and 100% of your owners are people. So why in the world you wouldn't focus on people is beyond him, the way he describes it. And I so agree with that. And I can tell you, throughout my career, I've been real involved in tech as a former CIO at Sprouts, and you can know so much about the business, but if you don't truly understand, if you're not a student of people, you're going to have a hard time. And again, from a technology standpoint, I worked for United Supermarkets when we transitioned from non-scanning to scanning. So I had gotten my certification. I could shut a store down, replace the whole front end system, bring it all to life, open the store by 7 a.m. the next morning. And when I became president of the company, you know how much value that skill had for me?
Yeah.
0.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody
But
was
leading
impressed.
people. Yeah, nobody cared that you knew which cable went in where and how to do those things.
Right.
But again, I say it all the time, and I know it's similar to your Simon Sinek thing. Every business is a people business. Doesn't
It
matter
is.
what you're doing. Every business is a people business at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell the grocery channel for sure, try to run one of these things by yourself. It doesn't work.
Yeah. No,
It does not
absolutely.
work.
Well, so you've been in leadership, you've been in kind of a place of influence for quite some time, Steve. So I guess walk me through the inception of kind of where the 5 rules came from, because typically books don't just come out of thin air, unless your name's Sean Maxwell, who I know you're an understudy of, and it seems like that guy has a book, but typically they're percolating for years before you actually put them down on paper. So I'd love for you to kind of talk through some of the lessons before we jump straight into the rules, because I do think the ideas have been there. You've lived them. I've read through at least what the five rules are, and you kind of sent me a gift box, and I'll put it up for those listeners that that are out on online, watching. But I guess where did the whole inception of the idea of creating the book before the masterclass and even all of that come from?
Yeah, that's great. As a leader, and John Maxwell, I was in his inner circle for a year. So he personally mentored me for a year. And he challenged me one night at dinner to write a set of five rules and live by them, teach by them, coach by them. That was kind of how it started. And then I had worked with a guy that Tony Stafford in Kansas City, and he had a set of three rules. And the first one was do your job, and his third one was no surprises. I asked him if I could borrow those, and I built on those. I changed rule number 2, and then I added rule number 4 and rule number 5. And I really brought them to life, honestly, when I was at Sprouts about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And before we went public, our CEO there, Doug Sanders, wanted me to really, teach on the 5 rules. It was kind of the first time I ever put together a full presentation on them, because we had talked about them, and it was a set of rules that I went by. I expected my team to go by, and so they had already kind of garnered some attention, in the Sprouts world. And so anyway, before we went public, he asked me to present that to the entire executive team. So that was my first time, honestly, to present the 5 rules as we kind of know them today. And you can only imagine, as a company that's about to go public, it's very important that the behaviors are right. And each one of the rules really fit in good to that whole meeting that we had, and then the launch. And then it just really gained momentum, after that. And each, when I was at Sprouts and with Lucky's and with Rouse's, I mean, I walked in the door with the 5 rules. Everybody jumped on board of the 5 rules, and they're still alive and well today in the companies, that I came from. And when I semi-retired, I was a little concerned that the 5 rules would have, any kind of impact if I wasn't really one of the executive team members in the company. And all of that was laid to rest because people just grabbed a hold of them, embedded them in their culture. And again, today it's just amazing to see the transformation that takes place when you focus on people and how you behave. And when you don't behave properly, you get called out.
Well, and the other thing that I love about it, and you said it at kind of the onset, Steve, is the whole idea that says once you've got people rowing in the same direction with the same set of rules, it's amazing. It almost reminds me of kind of that Archimedes, give me a long enough lever and I can move the world. Same
Right.
idea with this 5 rules is like, you've got the ability once you've got everybody rowing in the same direction. So why don't you start with rule number 1? What is rule number 1? Again, for those that haven't gotten the book yet, why don't you talk, what is rule number 1 and why do you think it's so critical to be number 1? Because you picked it as number 1 for a reason.
That is a great question. And rule number 1 is do your job. And it's real simple. I really focus on each of the 3 words. It's do your job. It's action. And I tell the team, I always told my teams, you know what? It's okay to hurry. So do your job.
Yeah.
And then I need you to just do your job. Focus on your job. Don't worry about everybody else. Over my years in the business, I've had so many people that just wanted to be sure to point out what everybody else is doing wrong. And they really just needed to focus on what they're doing. And then the last word, obviously, is job. We're paying you adult money. So we'd like for you to give me adult performance here with the way you're going to do your job. And you never want to back up to a paycheck. So you really want to do your job. And if everybody on the team does their job, everything works. And when they don't, that's when you get the conflicts that arise, in the business.
Well, and I think we both have led for a number of years. And I think there's oftentimes that we get stuck in this, I like to call it sideways energy, where you're constantly thinking about, well, they're not this and they're not that. I've got, 3 teenagers and a 10-year-old at home. And well, this, kid didn't do that. It's like, stop. If you continue to do what you're supposed to do and don't worry about anybody else and spend all of that energy doing what you were trained to do, what you should be doing, not worrying about, somebody else's role in the deal. I guess I'd love for you to kind of share, what kind of impact do you see when people own this rule?
Well, and that's what's fun. The way I explain it, and in the book, I have 5 life lessons under each rule on how to do that rule only better. So I share that in the book and in the podcast and in the masterclass. But doing your job is something that you need to, first of all, know what your job is. And that's what I can tell you throughout my career. There was so many people, myself included, the training was not where it needed to be. I didn't get trained. Like, kind of thrown in there and figured out. That was the way I kind of learned a whole lot of stuff in my early years.
Included probably changing the front end of those stores back in the day,
Yeah.
right? It was like, I don't know, figure it
Oh,
out. Hopefully you can open the next morning, right?
yeah, that's right. So that's a little pressure there. But you really need to know what your job is. You need to do it. You need to own it, and you need to be adult enough to accept that that's what you're hired on to do. And it's really like chess pieces on a chessboard. Each player can move a certain way, hop so many spaces, and that's the way it is with teams. Is it takes really the orchestration of everybody that knows what their job is, and they simply do it, and they do it every day. And one of the challenges we've had throughout my career, and I see it every day today, is consistency in
Hmm.
doing the job. One day you do it good, and the next day you kind of slough it off and don't do it so good. But I can tell you that do your job gets repeated throughout the grocery industry and my clients' businesses because it comes up a lot, honestly. When somebody's not doing their job, and we have these wristbands where we everybody gets these wristbands with the 5 rules on them. And if everybody's wearing a wristband with the 5 rules on them and somebody's not doing their job, and you need to have a coaching conversation with them, it's real easy to just reach over there and touch that wristband and say, hey, that rule number one is do your job. And you're not doing your job. And if you'll let me coach you a little bit, I'll help you get there.
Hmm.
That's one of the things that I think these rules help. Again, it's a common language throughout the organization. And once you're introduced to the 5 rules and you hear one of them again, immediately you're like, you're right. Do your job. Do your job.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's incumbent upon us leaders to help people to do their jobs successfully because
Right.
I fundamentally believe that people want to do a good job, but they
Absolutely.
need clarity, they need leadership, they need direction. This is what a good job looks like. The second rule is slightly akin to a family rule that we have. And so as we raised our kids, we often would say, was that loving and was that kind? And so this was, somebody stole my toy. Was that, and I hit them. Was that loving and was that kind? And
Yeah.
our best friends would pick on us. We'd vacation with them, and they'd be like, they'd always tease us as the adults that late after the kids went to bed. Was that loving? Was that kind? But at the end of the day, I love that idea that says, so rule number two, I guess, digging a little bit deeper. What does it mean to by being kind? I guess.
Yeah. And the rule used to be when I first did just the 3 rules, rule number 2 was be nice.
Hmm.
People misinterpreted that as soft. So
Yeah.
I changed it to kind because there's no really misinterpretation of kind, honestly. And I will also tell you that now that this is implemented out in so many businesses across the country, I've had so many people come back and say that's been the most impactful rule with our teams because our teams, we're finding that our teams are kinder to our customers. They're kinder to our vendor partners. They're kinder to each other. And if that's not a win, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes even being kind sometimes means having a hard conversation.
Right.
Sometimes being kind goes back to rule one that says, are you really doing your job?
Yeah.
Because it's hurting our customer or it's hurting our vendor or it's hurting a fellow team member. So sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to interrupt you there, but I love that rule. And I,
Yeah.
wanted to just remind everybody that kind doesn't always be nice.
Yeah.
It means that kind might mean that we've got to achieve this goal and you got to go work a little bit harder to get there.
Yeah. My son Travis Black has the 5 rules in his car dealership in Waukee, Iowa. And he's got a big sign up on the wall and he's got it's rule number 1 is do your job. Rule number 2 is be kind. And there's a little asterisk by be kind. And when you look at the bottom, it says if you don't do rule number 1, I don't have to do rule number 2.
Isn't that the truth, right?
So,
We've all probably had some unkind conversations with team members, and I certainly have with my children. That's for darn sure.
yeah. Well, and I teach this all the time. It's easy to be kind to kind people.
Hmm.
The challenge comes in when they're not unkind. When that customer walks in and they're infuriated and they're mad. Well, there's a test, or you got a
Yeah.
team member that's not doing their job and you just keep having to talk to them, or they're creating drama or whatever. And, I do believe since COVID, that the world seems to be angrier than it's ever been. I don't know
Yeah.
why. I don't know if
Definitely
that's
more
true.
isolated.
I don't know if
I think
that's
it's more
true.
isolated.
Yeah.
As I look at my teen kids, they're able to live a life completely devoid of having to be a real human around other people.
Yeah, that's right. But, and there's never really a reason to be unkind. And in my presentation, I play the Chick-fil-A video about every life has a story. And
Hmm.
think about everybody that you work with, every customer that walks in your store, they got stuff going on. And man, if there was ever a time for kindness to be front and center, it's today because you just don't know what kind of battles people are fighting when they come to work. when they come in your store, and, you know, even the vendor partners that are delivering bread to your store. You don't know what they faced before they got there. So take it easy on them, you know,
Mhm.
and assume
Yeah.
the best first. Don't just jump right in the middle of somebody, but being kind has really been a game changer.
Yeah, no, and that one, it definitely, of the five, I would say that that one probably resonated with me the most. Steve, just because I've shared this video, the Chick-fil-A video, with a few people, can you just walk through it for just a second? Today's episode is brought to you by Restaurant Technologies Incorporated. They are the leaders in automated cooking oil management. And if you're not familiar with them, they've been on the show a few times to share some of the unique and cool things that they've been doing in the oil management space. They have an end-to-end closed-loop automated system that helps deliver, monitor, filter, collect, and recycle your cooking oil. Sounds like a lot. It's because they do a ton to help clean up one of the dirtiest jobs and most dangerous jobs in your kitchen. You can check them out by visiting rti-inc.com or by calling 888-779-5314. They've already helped over 45,000 customers in the United States with their cooking oil, so clearly they're doing something right. Now back to the episode. Because it might have been one of the most impactful videos I've watched. I saw it probably 10 years ago at a John Maxwell event, and it still resonates with me, where, you know, that whole, you don't know what the story that somebody else is living with. They just got diagnosed with cancer. You know, they
Yeah,
lost their mom last night.
right.
You know, I guess give everybody a picture real quick, and I'll see if I can find the link to put it in the video
Yeah.
before I post this.
Yeah, for sure. And you can find it on YouTube. Every Life Has a Story, Chick-fil-A, and you can find it. And they've actually got two versions of it now. So, but I was in the Chick-fil-A offices with John Maxwell when they debuted that video. And we were kind of set up theater style. There was about 300 of us. And I'm glad they had boxes of Kleenexes around, because there wasn't a dry eye in that audience when that video stopped playing, because it really, every customer that walks in the door, it kind of shows a blurb of what's going on in their life. And
Mhm.
it makes you pause, because again, there's some gut wrenching stories of that's going on in people's lives, whether it's death or cancer, or a child that's gone off to war, or, you know, there's a little girl in the video that her, you know, the mom died in childbirth and the dad blames her. And oh my gosh, you know, that it really just pulls your heart plumb out of your chest. But what it did for me was, I never walked into my corporate office or any store or really any venue that had several people that I wasn't replaying that video in my mind. And I've watched it thousands of times, and it still chokes me up, and it puts my feet firmly on the ground to be reminded why we need to be kind to people. We shouldn't have to have a reason to be kind to people, but sometimes we have to be reminded why we need to be kind to people. I mean, and I went through that, you know, when I was with Rouse's in New Orleans. I mean, I'd go into stores and I'd talk to people, and they'd tell me maybe something they'd experienced. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
they're there with a smile on their face, taking care of customers. And then maybe they had a child that got murdered last night, or a parent that was killed in a car wreck. And you're just like, how are you even here?
Yeah, and you're here bagging groceries, or you're here stocking a shelf,
Yeah.
or whatever else. Yeah,
And
yeah,
again, and
and
yeah, what
I
a
love that.
lesson for us as leaders.
We don't know. And again, to your point, there's times even in kind of the do your job where you show up and you're not fully present to be able to do your job. But
Yeah.
oftentimes it's because something else has got on your brain. You had a
Yeah.
kid that was up sick all night, and you're not willing to tell your boss that, but your performance is not exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
That's where Be Kind really, I guess, can make a difference as a leader.
Yeah, I read a story the other day where this guy was constantly being late to come to work, and his boss pulled him in his office and said, "Hey, what's going on? You've been late a lot, and what are we doing here?" And he goes, "Well, I'm taking my wife to chemo, and I'm having to take my kids to school, and I'm sorry. Here's my resignation letter." And he just knew that he needed to resign, and the boss took that resignation letter and tore it up. He said, "No, you can be on half days till you get past this crisis." And when you think about what we're supposed to be as leaders, forget the policy guide, forget, you know, all of that. When somebody's going through something, it's okay to pick them up and carry them through that valley. And that's really a big missing piece in corporate America today is, you know, due to policy, we can't do this, can't do that.
I hate it. I hate it. So, well, let's dig through rule number three, Steve. So, no surprises. As a leader, I love this one because all too often I get less kind when I get surprised by things, and I'm now on my heels trying to deal with something. But where
Right.
did no surprises come from?
Well, initially it came from as a CIO at Sprouts, there would be times my CEO or COO would be out in the stores, and the stores were always happy to report to them that they had 2 lanes down or 3 credit card machines down or a printer down, and the first person they'd call was me. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, guys, I'll make you a deal. Why don't you just call me in the first place? And
Yeah.
that's kind of where the no surprises came from was because usually when I'd get a phone call like that, I'd be like, well, first I've heard of it, can't fix what I don't know is wrong. And throughout the whole business world, there's so many times, no surprises. I just did a recent podcast with Greg Rush of the Houchins Food Group, and he said no surprises is probably the most quoted rule from his team. They'll walk in the door or send him an email or send him a text and say, "This is under no surprises, boss." So you need to know that.
We're giving you bad news early and often. I tell my team that all the time. Give me the
Yeah,
bad news early. I'd
yeah,
rather know about it before it becomes a problem than after it becomes a problem, right?
right. And that's what I talk about in the book is we got to solve problems at the spark level, not the roaring fire level. And when you sit on information, as we all know, that bad news never gets better with time. And we have to know it as soon as possible. And a lot of times I'd have people say, well, you're so busy, I hate to bother you. And
Oh gosh.
I
If
always
I don't
say,
hear that 10 times a day from my team.
I always say, bother me,
Uh-huh.
please bother me. And as you know, sometimes you can get things done that they can't get done and you can get it done quicker, especially when there's so many parts, moving fast and all that. That if you'll tell me as soon as you know you got a problem you can't solve, raise your hand. That's another one of my lessons is raise your hand. It's not a crime to have a problem, but it's a crime to have a problem and not raise your hand. When there's thousands of people that can help you, don't think you got to do your job by yourself. It just means part of doing your job is knowing when to raise your hand and ask for help.
Yeah. And it might not mean that you moved the monkey off of your back onto the leader's back. It might be that you just now are at a place where, hey, we recognize that this is something that I can help you work through. And it's still going back to rule number one of do your job. But me now as the leader can help accelerate you. Steve, what's rule number four?
Rule number 4 is no drama. And again, that's a crowd favorite because we all live in different levels of drama filled lives. It wasn't really till I was doing some research on the book that I realized there were drama addicts. There's people that have been raised in a cesspool of drama and gossip, and they think it's normal. Well,
Yeah.
it's not
They
normal.
seek it out.
Yeah, it's
They
not.
seek it out from time to time. We had somebody in our life group in our small group. I was like, they just like living in the whitewash. It's like, come on, man, get out of it.
Yeah, I've known people that if there wasn't drama, they were going to create it because that's just where they're comfortable. you know, and Dave Ramsey has a no gossip policy in his company, and he'll warn you one time. And that video's in my masterclass, but that's a pretty direct video too. He'll warn you one time. He hears you or somebody else hears you, then you're gone. No, they don't write you up. They don't put you on a PIP plan or nothing else. You're gone. And he had to fire 1 or 2 people when he first started his company. And now he doesn't have to fire anybody now for gossiping because the team takes care of that. If there's a group in the break room and somebody's gossiping, just drama, a team member on his team will look at him and say, "Hey, we don't do that here," and
Yeah.
and that puts a stop to it.
Well, because as a leader, all too often we're dealing with the internal drama between team members. Or so I heard so and so said this about so. It's like you know what that rule alone just sets such a foundation of
Yep,
success to be able to say, hey,
right.
back to my comment about sideways energy. That's another one for me is stop the sideways energy. You got a
Yeah,
problem, go deal with it directly with that team member. I'm
that's right.
struggling back to some of these rules. Hey, Steve, it really hurt me when you did this, and teaching them how to have that hard conversation with them makes so many things so much easier, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I have a little practical thing I do when I give seminars is I have a drama towel. So
Yeah.
so
I love that.
I have people that have these hanging up. Mine's hanging up right outside my garage door. And when I come home from work, I reach over there and wipe that work drama on that towel. And I come in my house and I'm present. And
Mhm.
it's like when I leave in the morning to go to work, I reach over there and wipe that home drama on that towel. And I go to work and do my job,
That's great.
because everybody that you work with and everybody you live with has drama. There's no need
Yes.
to add to that. And they can't solve it anyway. It's just gossip and drama. And man, if we really have a no drama not allowed in the room. If you're in a conference room, trying to have a meeting and somebody starts bringing up drama, you just like, "No, we're not going to talk about that here." And
Mhm.
it's really that simple. It's hard to believe it's that simple to stop it. But as soon as you stop it, then they don't have that conversation again with you.
Yep.
But and we got to understand the difference in drama and real life events. If somebody can't pay their mortgage or they had a car wreck, that's not drama. That's a real life event. We need to give them time to go take care of that or be understanding that they're going through that. And so again, there's a huge difference in drama and real life events that people need. They need grace to get through that.
Yeah. And I guess digging a little bit deeper as a leader in the past or as you train in the masterclass, how do you help people to discern the difference between drama and real life situations? Because there are people on everybody's team that create the drama. They amazingly, they always have something they're carrying into work every day, and that is drama. And then there's other times that they truly did have flat tire on their way to work, which is why
Right.
they're late or whatever else.
Yeah, and it's really almost a case by case situation. But when everybody becomes cognizant of drama, and drama really is talking to somebody about something that can do nothing about it, and that's a best definition that I've come up with on how to deal with it. You just have to. Somebody in the room has to stop it. And if there's only two people in the room, then you're the person.
You got to be that person to have that hard conversation. What's the last rule, Steve? I feel like I could sit and talk to you about every one of these rules for forever, and we'll give everybody the opportunity to go find the book as well as figure out how to get involved in the masterclass before we get over. But what is the fifth rule?
Now, the fifth rule is protect the brand. And initially that rule was protect the mothership.
Okay.
And the reason I changed it to protect the brand is obviously the brand encompasses everything. But what the early teachings was, especially in a multi-unit environment, you can have a store or a restaurant do something that could potentially bring the mothership down. And,
Hmm.
and so that's really the lesson. The illustration I used in the book was back, several years ago, 20, 30 years ago. Food Lion had somebody in there recording some bad hamburger meat grinding, and that went viral. And you want to talk about almost brought the mothership down. That one event, and of course today everybody's got a cell phone that walks in your store. So if you're doing something or a restaurant, you're doing something today, there's a chance it's going to be on social media within 2 minutes.
Yeah. Well, the other piece that even back to your comment about the no gossip or no drama, we often we'll go out and you'll hear something about the brand. You'll be at a cocktail party, you'll be at the football game, you'll be at the at a golf round, and somebody will say something. Well, I so and so heard so and so about this brand.
Yeah.
Back to protecting the brand, say no. I think there's something else about that story, and I've heard people say this. And then as somebody that might be a leader in that business, you're going to go back and fix that. But
Right.
you're going to protect the brand even in those social settings because those things
Right.
have a chance to catch on fire, like you said.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I really think I'm kind of working on a second book, and it may be protect the brand and all facets of the brand. And obviously when you're selling food, especially prepared food, if you don't do things right, somebody could get sick or
Mhm.
worse, they could die.
Yeah.
So one of my lessons too is you always ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? Well,
Mhm.
if the worst that can happen is somebody could die, you better pay attention to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so, but from an initial standpoint on protect the brand, as I say, we're the brand. It's not the logo on the shirt. It's not the logo on our business card. It's not the sign on the building. It's us. It's the people in the organization. We're the brand, and we have to protect each other. And what I've seen throughout my career is sometimes we're the meanest to the ones we work with in the building and are supposed to be taking this company and this business forward. And yet we're not protecting each other. We're just piling on, kind of shooting our own wounded, so to speak. And so from a protect the brand standpoint on the people front is we protect each other. Just like
Mhm.
a family, we don't ever let somebody say something bad about my brother or my sister, my mother, my kids. It's like, no, you don't want to go there. And I think the same to your point, somebody brings up something bad about the brand and you're like, no, that's not the whole story. There's more to that. And you truly protect each other. And if you really have a problem with a team member, get with them one-on-one and have an
Yep.
adult conversation. And don't sugarcoat it and don't exaggerate it, but just have a conversation. We need to talk about this because you're not protecting the brand. And I use the acronym SAD. You protect the brand by what you say and how you act and what you do. And we really emphasized that before we went public. So one of my big teachings on especially public officers, you go out and do something crazy, get arrested and all that kind of stuff. The headlines will never have your name in it. It'll be your role in the company you work for. If you want to talk about protect the brand, there's a lot of people that needed to learn about protect the brand before they went out and they made a bad decision and got in trouble, then really tarnished the brand.
Yep. Well, and all too often, I mean, you think back about some of the biggest business scandals. It wasn't that Enron started day one being that way. There
Right.
was lots of things that happened before Enron fell. There was lots of things that happened before each of these things. There were so many warning signs. And back to the protect the brand and doing the hard things and doing it right is critical. And I love the all five of those lessons. You didn't stop with just the book. You talk about the masterclass. I'd love for you to wrap a little bit. What is the masterclass? I know you shared it with me directly, but I'd love for our listeners to hear. How do you embed these? Yes, reading a book is awesome. I love that you've distilled them down, but it's really hard to embed these into the frontline workers. Most people don't read nearly as much as I do, for sure. So how do you embed these in, and how does it make a difference in the organizations? And so I know you've got a path for people to go do that.
Yeah. So, well, what I actually had done with one of my clients down in Pearl River, Louisiana, AWG, Mike Schumacher, he brought me in to teach the five rules, teach on the five rules. And I went through, so there's five rules underneath each lesson's each rule's five life lessons on how to do that rule better. So there's 30 lessons. So I created a PowerPoint and I actually go through each one of those rules and lessons with me embedded in a small video circle in that class. And then I have homework at the end of each rule, where there's 2 homework assignments. So it really is, and the videos are only 5 to 7 minutes a piece. So the attention span for those of us in the grocery world, and obviously probably the restaurant world as well, is you don't want to sit in front of a computer for hours. Nobody wants to do that. So we really recommend take 30 weeks, do 1 lesson a week, and you watch it. Your team needs to watch it, and then you talk about it in your weekly staff meeting. And so in the Maxwell companies, we talk about learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little. So we really take it, dissect it into bite-sized chunks, and take this week's lesson, go bring it to life in the sales floor and with the team. Next week's lesson, same thing. So you repeat that for 30 weeks. And that's been one of the most, formulaic things we did was really broke it up, because you can sit and read the book in 2.5 hours. You can
Yep.
watch the masterclass in 3 hours, but it's all about retaining and teaching. And so that's when you see the five rules come to life in an organization, and people just grab onto it and bring it to life in their circle. So when
Yep.
you're affecting circles throughout your organization, that's when culture is impacted the most. And that's when people have seen these good results from the five rules. But then also, it's amazing when we get the values right. Instead of in the grocery business, we've always coached to numbers. If we'll coach to these 5 behaviors, the 5 behaviors is what's producing the numbers.
hmm
So let's get
Those
the
are just an end result of the behaviors that you're doing with your guests and with your team members all the time. I try and remind people it's getting up and doing your job. It's getting up and living these five rules that ultimately lead to the success.
yeah,
Nobody, I mean, I tell a very true story. Years ago, I was working with In-N-Out Burger, and very very successful brand. Obviously, anybody in the restaurant space knows them. And I had
yeah,
asked what makes it so successful, and almost every one of your rules was part of what they said. We find the right people, we give a second chance, but if you haven't figured it out, you're gone. So we can't
right,
mess with the culture. We really only measure 2 things at the time. They were only measuring 2 things because everything else was part of the spec. And if you did the things right,
yeah,
the rest of it took care of itself. And so, it is a simple game, but it's not easy. It's
that's
simple,
right, that's
simple,
right,
but it's not easy.
that's right.
Are you still open, Stephen? I don't even know the answer to this question. Are you still open to larger brands coming in and doing workshops as well
Yep,
as, the book and kind of the masterclass?
yep, for sure. Yeah, and
Okay.
that's what's kind of been fun about the evolution of writing the book, doing the audio book, the Spanish version, the Chinese version, the master class. Now I'm in a position that if somebody wants to, I usually get brought in to do the keynote and launch it with the teams. And then somebody in the organization, usually, whether it's a CEO, COO, or head of HR, I mean, they'll take it and then help pulse it out throughout those 30 weeks. And then sometime, and several of my clients, we've then come back and had a graduation ceremony
That's
where
awesome.
when everybody gets through with the 30 weeks, then I'll come back in then and do a graduation talk, because I talk about being a river, not a reservoir. And so once you've learned this, don't hold on to it like a reservoir
Mm,
does. Be a river and keep spreading that down, throughout the valleys of your teams, and nourish the teams in that way. So,
love it.
you know,
So, how do people get in touch, Steve? How do people learn more? How do they engage? Obviously, the five rules, I'll show it back up on the screen. I'll have a link to it. I know that that's there. I know that you've got the master classes. What should they expect? They've now listened to 40 minutes of us talking and are like, I need this. How do I figure out how to get engaged?
Yeah. So my website is abrighterday.live. And on the front page is there's a link to see the masterclass. There's a little video that explains the masterclass and how to sign up. And then you can contact me off my website. And I also write a monthly leadership article for the Shelby Report. It's a trade magazine for the grocery business that goes out to about 74,000 subscribers every month. And so I have all of those lessons as well in blog form on my website. I'm proud to have both of my sons have written leadership lessons. My son, Jared Black, my son, Travis Black. They have second generation leadership lessons on my website. And then my grandson, Dax Black, he has a leadership lesson there. So we've got some generational leadership content on my website. So that's available. But honestly, the best way to contact me is through that. And my email is just steve@abrighterday.life. And I'll be glad to follow up and get back with somebody on that.
Well, Steve, I thank you for the book. I thank you for writing the book. I thank you for distilling down so many of these life lessons that you've learned over your leadership journey. And I love to hear the impact that these are making, not just in your family, but in the businesses that you've impacted. And so, thank you for sharing the wisdom and bringing those things to light for our listeners.
Thanks, Jeremy, for having me. It's been fun.
Awesome. To our listeners, guys, like I say at the beginning, you guys got lots of choices. So thanks for hanging out. Please go check out Steve's book and his website and make it a great day.